Welcome back, everybody, to the second half of my interview with Gregory Fischbach. Just like with the first one, this took place, well, better said, this is put together from many, many hours over several months of conversations with Greg, bit by bit, so I do apologize for any repetitions or jumping around in the editing. I did the best I could to bring it down to what would be interesting for the listeners as opposed to just the weird conversations Greg and I had. Okay? Enjoy.
The end of the Williams contract. I got to ask, was it something you guys had already planned for that this might happen? And what percentage of Acclaim's revenue was coming from those arcade ports at that point?
I don't remember the percentage. First of all, we didn't plan for it to happen, but we didn't plan for it not to happen either.
Okay.
So we knew that we had the rights through a period of time, and whatever was released during that period of time, we had the rights to. That was it was very normal in terms of the way the agreements operated. When you licensed a property or you licensed a right, like from a film or whatever. And what was different about this one is that it really generated, it raised the level of the company and made people, they paid attention to us, but they paid more attention to us with Mortal Kombat. And it was the marketing of the game that really shined through because we sold and delivered so many units day one. And it was the first product that really focused on TV advertising, I would say. We use TV a lot, but that one we just spent a bunch of money for, and we wrote the ad so the only words in the ad were Mortal Kombat. You didn't have to change the language.
Yeah.
And Turok was very complimentary to that. Turok was released in 96 or 97. It was complimentary because it had pushed this N64 further than anybody had seen it push before. It was almost like watching the Unreal videos from the one they did with PlayStation. And then I saw another one today on Xbox. And I just said to myself, this really changes the dynamics of everything.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do a kind of an okay game and get away with it anymore. There's games that have great gameplay.
Yeah.
Tetris has good gameplay inside of it. Yeah, Candy Crush is good gameplay. You know, would you say the graphics are key? No, the graphics aren't key to either one of those, but they really make the game. I mean, the mechanic makes the game, the hooks in the game.
Yeah. And
I would say that we've looked at just a ton of product over the last year or so. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think that, you know, you keep rolling it back. And what I think is most dynamic, biggest change is that there are so many smaller developers / publishers. And I put developer first because they know how to write software. They know what they can spend, and they can focus on part of the game. They can either focus on the game mechanic, the hooks in the, as I call it, the hooks in the game, or they can focus on the artwork. Very rarely you find the two come together. Occasionally they do, and if you look at what the major companies are resting on, they're resting on games that have been released in the past, and the sequels being introduced. And that carries the company forward because they can calculate how many units it will sell worldwide and what it does for the franchise. And as long as they make it the best that they can make it at that point in time, they can move the ball forward. And when you look at what's coming out from the independents, and there's a ton of them right now, they don't have the same kind of body character that the games that come from the majors do. There's something that's always kind of lacking in it. And I don't think it's always money. Remember, Minecraft wasn't money.
That's true.
Yeah. And Candy Crush wasn't money. And Tetris wasn't money. But there is something that's hard to get around and makes it really special, unique, and different.
Yeah.
And when you talk to people like that, and you tell them what you want to do and what you want to build, you get very few no's. You get some disappointments, but you get very few no's from anybody. They all kind of understand where we're coming from. And when you say you want to build a major publishing company, that's a big deal. You know, that's not trying to compete on the same grounds, the same way that everybody else is competing. I think the consoles become critically important to the launch of the product. I don't think you can continue to release it and change it, release it and change it, release it and change it. I think the early access is an interesting vehicle for everyone to use, but I think it gets in the way of the final product. And it tells them whether they have a product or not. That is really good for that portion of it. But I think that if you think about how the consoles are written, there's no early access with Xbox and PlayStation and Switch. It is what it is. You get a box of oranges.
Well, you still have to download those 50 gigabyte patches sometimes, but yeah, those
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
But did you see the size of the memory those hardware systems, the new hardware systems come with?
Oh, it's insane. Yeah. I mean,
Microsoft has a terabyte of hardware, and I think and PlayStation has 3/4 of a terabyte.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
And it's a console. I mean, we're not talking a PC, it's a console. But
yeah. But they're really fast. And they'll really, you know, I bought a PC. I'm talking to you on a Mac. But I bought a PC just to play the games with.
Oh, okay.
So because you can't, most of the stuff is not configured to work on a Mac.
Well, yeah, it's a Mac. What do you want? It's what can I say? In my heart of hearts, I'm still an Amiga user, so it's like I have no love for the Mac.
About that.
I stuck with it far too long. Still got my box. I still got my box Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 2 on the Amiga. Try playing that with a one-button joystick. There's fun for you.
Not easy.
No. Okay, so Acclaim Comics, since we're talking about Turok and so forth, the comic book venture for Acclaim, how did that come about?
Because I decided that we needed properties. And it's very difficult to develop and continue to license all the time. And the films weren't working for us as they had been working in the past. And so my gut was that you can get it from comic books. And we had the rights to Spider-Man. And Spider-Man worked. And we saw what was happening. And so Valiant was available and we picked it up.
Okay.
We had enough extra cash at that time that we thought that the company would pay for itself. It didn't pay for itself. We eventually closed it, went out of business.
Why do you think it didn't work? Were the numbers just not there in the sales, or was it
because the business changed? The business dramatically changed, and people stopped buying comics, and they lost part of their distribution model.
Okay.
So you didn't have the same retailers that were involved in selling comics 2 years after we purchased the company than you did when we looked at the company the first time. And they became more selective. So the business kind of impaled on itself a little bit, imploded.
Yeah.
And we took 2 or 3 of the characters from the comics, and we made games from Shadow Man and Turok, and I think there was one other as well. And Turok really worked. And if Turok 2 and 3 worked as well as the first one worked, it would have paid for it. didn't make any difference what we paid for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so that was pretty interesting. And then you didn't ask me about the arcade company that we created.
I was going to get to it. So, okay, so that was the next one, the arcade company.
Right. So there, if you looked at what was happening in the market, all of the products were coming out of the arcades. That kind of leads into the relationship with Midway.
Yeah.
And that's how we got there. I mean, I kept looking around and looking around and looking around for properties. And that's how I got to The Simpsons that way, Mary Kate and Ashley that way. Mm-hmm. But I saw what was happening in the arcades, and the arcades were very successful.
Yeah.
Even some of the not so successful games, because it was a process whereby people stood in line to play. They knew the games, and the games got enough attention, and you were taking that product that they enjoyed playing by putting a quarter in it and making it available for the home market. And the games would stay within the arcades for maybe 6 months or so. We started the arcade division. We put in maybe 25 or 30 people. We built it in the Bay Area. It was in the Valley. And we did it before. EA did the same thing after we started it. I believe they followed us in. And we tried to develop 2 or 3 different games. We weren't successful with them, and we closed it down. Okay. But during that period of time, we paid more attention to what was going on in the arcades. And I think that we did it as we knew the license from Midway was coming to an end. I think that's when we started. And you're always kind of looking 2 or 3 years in front of yourself, because you had to put together a release schedule, and you had 20 or 25 games you had to launch during the course of the year. And you were trying to fill particular holes in the marketplace. I mean, sports was a big part of what we did. So we had baseball, we had football, we had basketball, and we even did hockey. Hockey was a terrible seller. And I think the most exciting part about what we did is when we went from writing on sprites to writing using a blue screen, and then when we did motion capture. And motion capture really was the beginning of what they're talking about now with Unreal 5, whatever, I think it's Unreal 5. And to be able to take the dynamics of a person walking across the room and capture the motion was really amazing. Then to be able to write it in polygons as opposed to, square at a time, pixels. Yeah. Made a big difference, because you could turn the character around, you could move him in easily, and it made the game look much more interesting and much more real. And in the beginning, I mean, the problem with Turok was that we were dealing with a chip that's that big. I don't even remember how big the chip was, but it wasn't as you couldn't put as much memory on it as you could do it on a disk. And then to be able to squish it all down and get all that information in there so you could do that was really amazing. And I can remember, and that's what actually turned people on. And that propelled the price of the stock to go up and everything else that happened with it.
Yeah.
And people looked at it, and it was just really amazing. We spent about $10 million going into using motion capture and building a studio. And we had a blue screen studio across the street from our office was located in Glen Cove. We had a 70,000 square foot building that we occupied.
Okay.
And we needed more space, and so we took space across the street. We took space all over Glen Cove, was where the place was. And it was fascinating. I mean, it was really fascinating to watch it grow. It was really, really fun.
And I got to ask, because Turok becomes an N64 exclusive, at least the first game. There's a PC port too, but why was the decision made to make that a Nintendo 64 exclusive as opposed to doing a simultaneous release on the PlayStation?
Because we had no confidence in the PlayStation, and we'd seen them come and go in the past. And we thought that we could get, and we did get more attention by just putting it on one system as opposed to putting on multiple systems.
Okay.
And people have followed that model. I mean, that's not an unusual model to follow in the games business, where you confine it to one of the hardware systems. And you're looking at the dedicated number of pieces of hardware in the marketplace. You're looking at the people behind it, and you're looking at the possibility of growth. And although I know the people at Sony much better today than I knew them then, the people that decided to go into the games market, Mickey Shuloff, it was really interesting. I mean, the mid 90s were really exciting in games.
Oh yeah,
it was really fun. And it was the beginning of its growth process. And when it started to move into, when the internet became more accessible to everybody, it changed the way you marketed and promoted the product. It changed what people were able to find out about the product before it was launched. And the short, sweet little videos that you did sometimes worked and sometimes didn't work. And it changed the way you marketed the product. It dramatically changed the way you marketed the product.
Did it also change the cost of marketing the product?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't cheaper. It was more expensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because
you had to do more things to it. You had to, and your lead times on it were longer. I mean, if you think about what we did with a few periodicals, and we just used print and commercials, TV commercials, it was a totally different way of approaching the marketing of the product. PR wasn't quite as important as it is today.
So just to get an idea, for example, what was the lead time, let's say in 93, 94, what was the lead time for a periodical ad back then?
Oh, 3 or 4 months, maybe.
Okay. So, yeah. And when you go to the online...
3 or 4 days, or maybe 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's happening faster, but you have to create more content. You can't just do the one ad for 1 month, I'm guessing, or...
No, you actually had to, your whole approach shot was different, and you had to really develop the game and introduce the game as a piece of art. It's more like the music business operated. Remember, the music business was, part of it was pay and play, right? The whole payola kind of thing that was on. And in that worked, but you had to really develop the audience for the song on the road, doing one-nighters. Thousands and thousands, or hundreds and hundreds of one-nighters, where you did the same thing over and over and over again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that must have been hard on the musicians.
They're traveling around in a van. There's 6 guys, 7 guys, in maybe a woman, I don't know. But they're driving around in vans and buses.
Oh, jeez.
And you're going from city to city, and you got a truck behind you. And it's really hard. There's nothing easy about it at all. But fun. At the age of 20 or 30, it's really fun. You're seeing a lot of life you've never seen before.
That's true, too.
Yeah. You get a chance to change the world.
And
anyway, I don't think we changed very much.
Not if you look at the news. But, okay, so you're moving to the online promotion of the product. You're creating more of your own intellectual property at this point at Acclaim.
Yeah. We bought studios during that period of time.
I was about to ask. So in order to do this, you're obviously bringing in more creative talent because you guys were porting stuff. You didn't really have to do the design from the ground up. So what was the process?
We did it differently. We did design it from the ground up. And we did write the games. We paid to have it developed by third parties. And the difference, and this comes out of my background in the music business. In the music business, the artists are not employees of the label, they're contractors.
Yeah.
And their agreement is they'll turn over the album, they give them an advance for the album, and they turn over the album.
Yeah.
Well, if they need more money to complete the album with, you can politely say, no, thank you. Or I don't think so, or I don't like what you did, But when you have somebody that's working for you, you can't turn them off like that. And so you lost all of your in my mind, you lost your leverage over them.
Gotcha.
It's impossible not to pay somebody when they're working for you.
Yeah, because if you stop paying them, they're not working for you anymore.
No, but if you do it through a third party, you can stop paying the third party and say, thank you. I don't think so. I don't think it's working. And that then becomes their problem, not your problem. And so it wasn't until we were about 300 people, and I think up until we launched Mortal Kombat. And that included having offices in England, France, Germany, Australia, and Japan. That's Spain. We had in Madrid, office in Madrid too. And then when we started going to studios, we had studios in the United States and in the UK. We didn't go into France because France had the problems of how much time a worker can work. They had all kinds of laws that restrict it. And it was harder to really assemble. And most of the writing was taking place around Nice in the south of France. There wasn't much going on in Germany at that point in time.
No.
There wasn't much going on in the Netherlands. It was all coming out of the UK. It was like the music business almost. And some of the first players in the game business other than myself, came out of the music business as well. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, the publishing model was very similar.
It's a very similar model. It was a very similar model. It's totally different today.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And the studios that you guys started to purchase, how did you judge who to buy, who not to buy? How did even the evaluation of how did you figure out what's the value of a studio?
We actually put a team of people together, and that would go out and look at what was being done. We look at the past products and we look at what was being done currently. Okay. And what we were doing. So I think Iguana was the best example. Jeff Spanningberg was probably the most difficult person to manage. But the most creative studio that we dealt with. They're based in Austin and in Teesside, England. Teesside is in the north.
Okay.
Right. So, and they had about 100 people in each one of the facilities. And then we bought one in the UK, and I can't think of the guy's name, and we bought one in Salt Lake City.
Okay. Was it? Did you guys buy Probe software? I know we worked with them.
Yeah, we bought Probe. Yeah, and he actually created a lot more problems for us and himself than he should have.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
The founder. And he was, it was hard. I mean, they actually did some pretty interesting stuff, but he was hard to manage. And the one in Salt Lake was okay, but they did pretty average work for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was a way that we could take the games, we could take the wrestling titles, and we could take the baseball titles, and we could take the football titles, and put them in one studio and really develop a team around it. And that was what was important about it. And it was, I don't think it was any cheaper. I think it was probably more expensive to own the studio than to do it through independent third parties. But it was the way the business was moving, it was transitioning in the mid-90s. And the flow was different. And there was a period of time, I think, when we did very little support for the PC.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but we supported Sega, and we supported Nintendo, and we supported Sony all basically at the same time. And then when Microsoft came along, that was a blessing. And that company has really changed in the 10 or 15 years they've been in business, in the games business.
Why would you say it was a blessing? What did they add to the mix that was different?
They were another player. They had deep pockets. They were aggressive, and they wanted to be a major player, and they became a major player almost instantaneously. And that worried both Nintendo and Sony. And to that extent, it was additive as far as I was concerned.
What advantage did a pure publisher like Acclaim get from this new rivalry or intensified competition?
It was another player to deal with. It expanded the marketplace. It gave you the opportunity to sell more product. And it also gave you the opportunity, although we never took advantage of it, to license a particular title to a particular hardware company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in terms of license, I mean, give them the exclusives on a property and then get a better cut, make a better royalty deal on it on the back end.
Was that something, so you never did that with the Xbox, but was it something that you had done with any other platform up to that point?
No. Most of the time, the platforms up until 2000, 2001, 2, or 3, they weren't too interested in it. They were getting enough from what they had already. And it didn't seem to work like that. It also limited the number of players that you were competing with. Because you remember there was a lot of people that dropped out of the business.
That's true. A lot of publishers disappeared around that time.
Yeah. And I mean, it was very hard to transition yourself from an English publisher to an English mammoth publisher. You know, it was, Eidos tried to do it. I don't think he did it so successfully, but they tried to.
Yeah, they rode the Lara Croft train a little too long, and a lot of their other developments never panned out.
Right. But that's true of everybody. I mean, they. Do you think EA's ridden the Madden train too long? You don't have to answer that question.
Well, they've only been doing Madden games for 30 years, so come on. It's no, literally, they just celebrated the 30th anniversary. It's insane that franchise is still going. But yeah,
they figured out a play mechanic, and they've got the audience, and they've got almost an exclusive right now.
I think they actually do have. I don't think anybody else has an NFL license, at least not a Players Association license.
No, they've got Take-Two has some other kind of variation of a football game.
Yeah.
That they're supposed to be writing.
Yeah, but the days of an NFL blitz and a quarterback club and everybody being out there at the same time are over.
Oh no, yeah. And it was very difficult to compete. So you had to spend a lot of money, and you had to have real legs in order to do that. And you had to take the risk.
That's true.
Because it was a big risk. And to introduce a new football game against EA would have been a hard thing to do because it controlled so much of the market up to that point in time. So
you guys are developing all the new studios. You've got some very good franchises that belong to you at this point. Obviously, things don't... At some point, things start to get a little bit less stable for Acclaim. What were some of the hurdles that started to slow the company down?
It was internal, it wasn't external.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would say that we brought ourselves down. We weren't compelled to come down. And Jim Skropowski and myself owned the company. and we both worked at it very hard. And we would talk 24/7. And whenever we encountered a problem, we never looked back. We just fixed the problem. Didn't make any difference how we got there. It didn't, you could get there any way you wanted to. It doesn't make any difference. You just fix the problem and go on to the next thing. And when you lose that ability, I'll be a little bit ethereal, you lost the ability to really compete. Because one of the things, games business always goes up and down. All kinds of entertainment businesses go up and go down. You have good years, you have bad years. And the question is how do you get yourself out of the holes? And if you can't figure out how to get yourself out of the holes and you spend too much time arguing about how you got in the hole, it doesn't work. And that's what I think brought the company down. I mean, you could look at all the other factors that were around, and the fact that we weren't communicating, the fact that we didn't communicate the same way. And I can't say it's my fault or Jimmy's fault, or, it lies with both of us, I believe. But it doesn't work like that. It doesn't, you have to be able to solve the problem. And you have to figure out how to solve the problem. And up to that point, for the first 15, 16 years, we were able to solve everything. For the last 2, we weren't.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. The other thing, we've been very successful up to that point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, just tremendously successful from both a monetary standpoint and a company standpoint. And maybe, when you get there, your egos get a little bit too big sometimes.
Yeah, that's, you wouldn't be the first people to fall into that trap.
No. Companies do. You can watch every company goes through that thing. Amazon with, what's his face? With the divorce from his wife. Yeah. I mean, you could say that was a trip and fall. I don't know what the long-term ramifications of that are. I mean, he's a really good manager. Bezos is.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the impact of his separation from his wife and everything else that goes on.
That's true. That is one of those situations where you never. You'd have to look at what the final divorce agreement is and what the impact is going to be on the split of the stocks.
I think it's more what the relationship is, not what's written on paper. I'm sorry.
That's true too. That's true too. I was just thinking on a voting level of the stock, but you're right.
I was just thinking about how disruptive it must have been while they're going through that for both of them.
True.
And there's neither a right or a wrong. Something happened along the way, and it's very, very difficult to walk your way through that.
Fortunately,
it doesn't seem to have impacted the company, which was really interesting to me.
Well,
the company's worth $1 trillion plus right now.
Yeah. Well, it probably is a testament to the to the structure, to the logistical structure, and to the management structure that they've put in place, that even if one of them is a little, if he is not 100% on his game, the company still has the mechanisms to run on its own.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't run on its own, but there's somebody that fills in the gaps.
Yeah.
Things don't run on their own.
No, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. But when you're as big as that, you're not really micromanaging anymore either.
No, you're not micromanaging. But on the other hand, they talk about their meetings and how they put them together. And the question now is, how do you provide diversity within those meetings? And how do you bring other people of different sexes and different colors in? And that's an important part of what they have to figure out how to do. And can you get the same thing out of that other person that you're replacing? And I've never sat with them, so I have no idea how they operate internally. I've never been to one of those meetings. But I think they should be really interesting. I mean, they're not interesting. You go to meeting A, could be boring because they're talking about what they're going to do on the picnic or something like that. But some of the decisions they made have been really clever. I mean, I think that AWS is a real clever decision.
Oh, definitely.
The game business really sucks, by the way.
Acclaim, I don't want to say fades away, but it's not what you would say. I mean, how would you describe the ending of Acclaim?
No, I was very troubled by it. I mean, because we closed the door one day and we said, "Thank you very much, don't come back." And I can remember talking with Jimmy, and we made sure that everybody had health insurance for the next month or 8 weeks or whatever it was, and we paid it out of our own pockets. That was really important to us. That was important. It was really important to me that they didn't feel like they got, left in a lurch. And I thought that the end of it was just awful. I mean, it wasn't fun. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't pleasant. And it's interesting because it could have been sold. But what was being offered for it was nothing. And I don't know how we got to that point in time. I think it was because we weren't really communicating very well at that point. Because we could have solved the problem. It wasn't so hard to solve the problem. And had we been able to solve the problem, though, everything would have changed. It would have been much different. So I don't know. I actually don't know. How's that?
Yeah. And I mean, you say what was being offered for the company wasn't much. Who had put in offers?
Oh, some of the other hardware companies.
Oh, okay.
I won't tell you who, but
of course.
They were there. Yeah.
Okay.
And it just was, it was the only business that I've been involved with that I really loved that kind of went away on me. And I didn't walk away from it or change it, decide that I wanted to do something else. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I got a big kick out of it. And I've done a lot of other things since then. And the reason for Accelerate is because I want to go out and see if I can do it again. And I think it's just really exciting. I think it's a very exciting business. Got a lot more issues than it had before. People are a little bit different. Some of the people are more mature, but it's an interesting business.
I don't disagree with you on that. So, what did you do after Acclaim?
Oh, I started to try and put two mobile game companies together, one from Europe and one from the United States. And I found Mr. Good Living. And I found another one, I can't remember the name of it, in California. And the two didn't want to get married. The people at Mr. Good Living really just wanted the cash from the business.
Okay.
And we ended up selling both of them. And that was kind of what I had done as a lawyer. I didn't think it was very hard to change and put, quote, a banking hat on and becoming a banker in that particular instance. And then I became involved in casual gaming, very closely aligned with Mumbo Jumbo. And then a friend of mine asked me to go and run U-Star, which I did for U-Star was best description I can give it as movie karaoke. We've launched, it was a PC product, and the PC sold with a green screen, sold for $170, I think.
Okay.
Cost of goods were around $130, $140, $150. There was no money in it. And we put it on Connect, and we put it on PS3. And I thought that with Connect, we would sell 1 million pieces or more because we were one of the early launch titles. And what happened was that it was positioned for a casual audience, and the hardcore gamers bought it.
Ooh.
And U-Star was a casual game, appealed to a casual gamer. Basically, what it did was it eliminated an actor and his voice from film, and you could, for 15 or 30 seconds, and you could fill it in.
Oh,
You
okay.
could use his audio if you wanted to and just do the acting, or you could use your own audio and your own visual.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was different. And the tech around it was pretty interesting, and it was right as social gaming was kind of beginning to have an appearance in the marketplace. And we created a site, and you could post your videos on the site. And the problem is that, unlike Guitar Hero or even TikTok, is that when you posted, you really became a public posting, and people were not inclined to publicly post things that they had performed for the whole world to critique, when they could look at the actor doing it and then they could look at themselves doing it. And so that caused a lot of issues. And the site never did what the site was supposed to do in my mind. And the game did okay. I think we sold 400,000 or 500,000 pieces. We did it. We did the first one, and then we did the second one. Then I said, "Thank you much. I'm not going to do this anymore." And that's when I started doing Rabb.it. And Rabb.it was an idea that came from Ustar, the people at Ustar, and it was basically being able to video chat and text while watching a film. And the early version of the product was done for a laptop. And the problem with it is that you had to download another piece of software in order to make sure that the sound didn't go back and forth and you didn't pick an echo. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later that Philippe figured out how to do it and do it in the browser. And we used WebRTC as kind of the basis for doing it, and just took it and expanded upon it. And then created a media center in Virginia. Company's based in California. Media center's based in Virginia. And I think it was cheaper than running our own, using AWS or using Azure. And I think we had 25,000 or 30,000 boxes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we had 3 million users.
That's a lot, actually.
Yeah. But it got there and it just kind of flattened out. And better than half of them came from outside the United States. And we were very polite to the film companies. I felt that if the film companies felt they were stealing the product, that they would send us nasty letters and tell us to die. There's a word in front of that, but this "die" is the last word. And we were polite if could prevent the users from taking film that was picked up from one of the torrent sites. So we could stop that. We could stop them from asking their friends to join from outside the United States. We could do a lot of things. We had a lot of control over the distribution of the product. And I would say that Reid Hastings at Netflix was the most interesting of all of them, because he didn't shut us down. He could have shut us down anytime he wanted to. And the only thing that he asked is that we not allow people from outside the United States to view content that was licensed for the United States or licensed. So basically all the content at that point in time had this kind of territorial restrictions on it. You understand that?
Oh, we still have it right now. My selection on Netflix is very different from your selection on Netflix.
I know that. Yeah. But it worked, and users liked it. They sampled it for a little while. First, we ran only on a high-end Mac, and you had to have installed in the Mac the latest version of Mac in order to play it, the operating system. And that didn't work out very well because people didn't do that. Our audience was young, and $25 was a lot of money. So in the beginning, that was one of the issues that we overcame. And then we made it work on mobile. So it worked on both Android and iOS. And had we kept it going for another 6 or 7 months, the outcome would have been totally different. We raised $50 million for it. We had Andreessen Horowitz and we had Bessemer in there as investors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was
Some
a
big
real
guns.
company. And there was about 40 people that worked there, maybe 50.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was an invention designed for a pandemic and a lockdown situation.
Yeah, it really worked. And it worked. It could have been Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it had all those features in it, and you could, it was just written to do all these things. But anyway, that's yesterday.
Yeah. What is today?
When we launched Mortal Kombat, Howard Lincoln, who was at Nintendo at that point in time, brought myself and Probst, who was running Sega, and Larry together, who was running EA. And we sat down and we formed the ESA and the ESRB. And he said that Nintendo really wanted to be out of the ratings business, and they made us change the blood to green, if you remember what they did with the blood in Mortal Kombat. And it gave Sega a leg up, and we sold more Sega software than we sold Nintendo software. And that actually propelled the system forward. And Howard decided that that was the wrong approach. And he must have spoken to Arakawa and Yamauchi, who must have agreed with him. Yamauchi was the CEO, and Arakawa was the son-in-law that was running North America and Europe. And we did it. And we formed at first, when we had the ESRB, we hired this gentleman who was, I'm not going to tell you all the stories because they're bad stories. But it was really interesting. And then they really began to formalize it about 10 years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago. And they put in a real structure around the ratings board.
Yeah.
And they made it into something that was really different. And the ratings really meant something. In the beginning, they were kind of like a tag you put on the product. And I think the guy's name was Arthur Kroger that was running it. But he was eventually asked to resign, and somebody else was employed in his place, this woman. Mm-hmm. And she's done a much better job in terms of running the whole organization. So,
yeah. I mean, it's
but it was quite. And I thought that Zuckerberg should have brought Apple and Google together with him, and maybe even AWS, Amazon. And they should have formed some sort of a grouping as to how they were going to conduct themselves and what they wanted to say, because they have the same issues territory by territory. It's not just limited to the United States.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, Germany has its set of rules. I mean, Germany has a rating system inside of it.
Yeah.
And you have to be compliant with all that stuff. And so you better figure out how you're going to deal with this. And do you want after Mortal Kombat, we testified before Congress, and they asked the most inane questions about how the industry operated. And I came to the conclusion that the reason that they went after Mortal Kombat was because Toys R Us was our largest distributor. They had 20% of the market at that point in 93. And they all looked at like a toy, like a child's toy.
Yeah.
And that's not who the audience was.
No, that's true.
But they had trouble getting over that one, and they didn't understand Electronic Boutique and GameStop and the rest of them, how they all fit together, and Best Buy and Walmart. And so I think that when I saw some of the hearings where Facebook was testifying before Congress, they asked the same kind of inane questions. You got a bunch of people my age who've never looked at the keyboard before and have no idea what Facebook is. So they're going to regulate them? Not a chance. And if they got people inside the office that can regulate them, they're either going to be too much to the left or the right. They're going to be too heavy. They're going to be not heavy enough. And there's a balance in between will work. And I know that what we did was we copied the Motion Picture Association, the ratings board. It was important to put the ratings on the product because that kept everybody at bay. And that stopped all the people who were going to shut the business down, we're going to take you out of business and blah, blah, blah. And 60 Minutes was the worst, or the best, whatever you want to say. They would stand outside of our offices. We go out the back door because they kept wanting to interview us. And we said, no, we don't. I don't think we want to do this one.
Oh, man.
So it was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah. Now, because you just mentioned Electronics Boutique and GameStop and Supper, et cetera, and so forth. Now, traditionally, toys were a consignment business. By the time you get into the early 90s, the Mortal Kombat era, was Toys R Us still a consignment business for video games? And were the...
We never called it consignment.
A what?
It was structured very similar to the music business, which had 100% return capability inside the business. So the buyer would say to you, I really like your new game, but I got all this inventory tied up and I don't have any money left. So what are you going to do with it? And you would go and you'd take the inventory back. Or you'd make some discount on the inventory so they could sell it through at a lower price point.
Okay.
Because it was sitting in their warehouse and it was too difficult for them to deliver back to you. But so you would accommodate, and they still accommodate. It hasn't changed.
Okay. So
the digital bit makes it easier in some parts because you don't have the inventory management systems that you had before. And the reason that Walmart did so well was they could tell you, they would let you into their system and they could tell you store by store, sell through and inventories on hand. And you couldn't see everybody's product, but you could see your own. You could tell what the sell-through was on your product. And it was really helpful. Really interesting. And that's why Kmart had so much trouble, because Kmart didn't have those systems inside of it. And they were the first ones to do that. Then everybody else, that became standard fare.
Okay, so yeah, you guys had to then basically bite the bullet if a product didn't move.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did your internal math work as a publisher to sort of build in a cushion against that? I mean, did you have any kind of mechanisms to try to judge the market for a particular game before sending off the orders for production?
Yes. I mean, it was part of it was gut, part of it was what was the initial selling going to look like? How many units were they going to have? What did you feel about the product? Was it a rating issue? The ones we took a real gamble on were Mortal Kombat. I mean, I can tell you that. And then the Metacritics came in much later, and we had one game that was rated 100 by the Metacritics, maybe 95. I don't know what it was. It's a very high rating. And we sold this many, 0. We sold more than 0. But it didn't perform and do what it was supposed to do in our minds.
Gotcha.
And we didn't order up heavy on it because the selling wasn't great on it. But we expected that it was going to catch on. It never caught on. It was really interesting. I mean, and you'd have products that they give you a 50 or 60 on or 65, and you couldn't keep it in stock.
Tastes are a fickle thing.
They are very fickle.
Yeah.
And the German market was much easier to operate in. We didn't have the same kinds of issues generally in the German market because retailers would take it and they would own it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my impression. You have to talk to Rod Cousins, who can tell you what goes on in Europe, because that's where he's based, and he ran the European group.
Oh, okay, cool. Might have to drop him a line then. Might be interesting to get a slightly different perspective on things.
Right.
We're running out of time. Accelerate Games. I want to talk about where does the idea for that structure come from, and how did you get involved with it?
Well, I started to looking at another organization. So I went down to look at it. I talked to him and we couldn't agree on the price. We're still talking, by the way, so it's not dead yet. But I know that he isn't interested in being there and he wants to do other things. He comes out of the banking business. He's not really a gamer. And I looked at it, and then I talked to Philippe Clavel. Philippe was the person that actually did all the legwork on Rabb.it and made it work. He's one of the smartest. If I call him an engineer, it kind of quantifies him and limits him. He's not just an engineer. He's really a great manager, and he understands product, and he understands how to do things. He's a great problem solver. Yeah. That's as I look at him. He's French, and he's in either French or English. His mind works too fast, and so sometimes when you listen to him, you don't get what he's trying to tell you because it comes out garbled. So you have to ask him to slow down and go back again. He'll do that, and he actually explains it in the beginning. He's really nice, but really smart. And I told him this is what I wanted to do. He had been with that organization before, so he knew it a little bit. I went down and talked to some of his friends there. And then we brought in two other people. One of them was the person that kept calling me on the phone saying, you've got to meet with friends up here in Seattle. And I met with him after a long time. We talked for maybe a year, 2 years. And I met with him, and then we talked. We continued the conversation. I can't tell you everything.
Of course.
But I said to myself when I finished that meeting, do I really want to do this again? And I got on the plane in Seattle, and by the time I got off in New York, this is the way I tell myself the story, I smiled and I said yes. And I thought it would be really fun. And then when we couldn't acquire the company that I originally looked at, we started looking at games, and we used Steam. And what was clear was that if I introduced myself to a group and I listed the company, and then I said Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, and Turok, they actually knew who I was. Without the descriptor, it didn't work as well. And I could get better than half of the people to call me back. I thought that was really interesting. And I was really surprised at that because I didn't know what the impression was that everybody had of our company by the time that it was over. We closed it in 2004. And I started looking around, and then I thought that we met with a lot of people, and I thought that there were a lot of very, very strong developers, but they wanted to call themselves a publisher. And if you wanted to be a publisher, you had to release more than one game every 4 years, in my mind. It's all based on relationships. It's based on marketing, it's based on PR, and it's based on people in each one of the key territories throughout the world. You can't just kind of pretend it's going to happen on its own, because it doesn't happen on its own. Occasionally, but not very often. And so I thought that there was an opportunity to create a major publisher, and that the impact that was suffered by the music business and the media business was now being suffered by the gaming business as it's moving from packaged goods to digital distribution. And what I thought was most interesting of recent was Take-Two, who announced that 92% of their revenues from the last quarter was from digital distribution and not from boxes. That actually reconfirmed my own thought process about it. And I thought that as long as we have this space, there's an opportunity to create another substantial publishing company. And whether you do it as a standalone on your own, or you can buy something and merge it in, you can actually create something different with it? I don't know. I haven't reached that conclusion yet. I know that you have to be malleable. I know that you have to be light on your feet, that you have to want to win. I know that I know the right people to talk to. I'm not an expert at marketing. I'm not an expert at game design. I'm not an expert. Better with people, I think, than some of my friends. But I look at it as a combination of skills. And and one of the most interesting things we did at Acclaim was that we had one of those offsites where we brought in somebody, and it was basically how to work as a team. That was what it was about, team building. And they ask you to solve the puzzle yourself, and you came up with one score, and then they ask you now go with a team and solve another puzzle, and how you could do that. And it really showed me that as smart as I thought I was, as clever as I thought I was, that if you listen and work as a team, that you can build something much bigger and much stronger than you can do by yourself.
Mm.
And that said to me that it really said a lot to me, in terms of how you build an entity. And so when I started to go out on this one on my own, I went around and looked for people that would complement what we were doing. And I've talked to a marketing person that I worked with for maybe 10, 15 years. And I think she's really great. And she's been in the game business while I went off and did Rabb.it and the other stuff, right? And her background is marketing, and she asks all the right questions. And she looks at the product a little bit differently. She has her own taste of it. How much do you want to spend, blah, blah, blah. But I thought that when you marry a group of people together, when you build an organization with the right people, that you get a better result. And that you can actually create something, and I think there's a opportunity not to be an independent publisher, but to create a major company, and that's what we're trying to do at Accelerate. And this weekend I was on the phone with a gentleman in Singapore, who I think is just really interesting, and we were on Skype, and we've been talking on a regular basis for the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe.
Okay.
Whether something happens there or not, I don't know. I asked one of the people that I work with, Brett Gao, to look at the product. And Brett's better at product than I am. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of smart people and there's product. And so the question in my mind is, I think it's easier to do if you find an existing entity and you can fold whatever you want to do into that existing entity. To build from the start is a little bit harder, but it's possible. And then I think you have to go out and raise the money. You'll need more money than you should invest in this yourself.
Now, what is the role of the publisher in the digital age? When we think about publishers.
Well, here, I'll give you a best example. And this is really easy. Everybody uses the same pricing structure for both Steam and Epic. For new games or old games. And nobody uses Steam and Epic against each other. The reason that GameStop and the rest of them were successful is that you would sell them the product at one price, they would discount it. And so instead of selling it at $49 or $59 or $69, they would sell it at $44 or $23 or whatever the number was in between. And they would take a shorter margin on it. You give them marketing dollars and co-op and some other stuff in order to do that. But you would figure out a way to use pricing to market sell-through. And better the sell-through on the product, the more interest it created throughout the world. So the higher the sell-through, people would pay attention to the numbers. And you could use it to move the product through the territory. And then, each product doesn't work. What works in the German market may not work in the United States. I mean, the reason that we didn't do a soccer game like FIFA Soccer, or football as you would call it, I'm not sure whether you call it football or soccer.
Football.
It's probably you if you call it football. Was because it was an American sport. And EA did it, and they did it really well. And they got the FIFA license. And they kept using that as one of the brands that continues to build that company. And you could say it looks a little lethargic sometimes. They keep changing its management structure frequently lately. But they do a great job. And Bobby Kotick bought Worlds of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And nobody was interested in that. Paid $2 billion, I think, for it. He bought Candy Crush from King.com, I think it was.
Yeah.
For a bigger number. Next product still sells, unbeknownst to all of us.
I don't understand quite why it does as well as it does, but yes, it definitely works wonders.
Think about Tetris and the original Game Boy.
That was lightning in a bottle when you think about it. It's insane.
And Pong.
True.
I mean, there's some really simple, dumb games, and that have really attracted a larger audience. And one word that I learned that I didn't know before was midcore.
Yeah.
There's hardcore, there's casual, and now there's midcore. I didn't know midcore existed. But you can look at, I mean, Worlds of Warcraft is 20 years old, 25, 20, must be 15 to 20 years old, I think.
World of Warcraft comes out 2004, if I remember correctly. 2000.
And Jagex released, what's it called? Rain something?
Wait. Jagex,
here it is. It's, I can never think of the name of the product. RuneScape.
Oh, yeah, RuneScape.
Another MMORPG. But has no audience in the United States.
Yeah.
But was released in 1999 or 2001, whenever, something like that. It still sells. It makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've tried to do other games, but they can't do anything that does the kinds of numbers that RuneScape can do. And so there are, that's a different kind of a product. And how are you, that audience stays with that product. They get married in those products. They have, one of the guys in our Salt Lake City studio had a family of 4, got married on EverQuest, and would play EverQuest every night.
And EverQuest basically died too. So it's some of those products
died. No, EverQuest didn't die. That's the interesting part about it. EverQuest hasn't died.
It's still running.
It died in your mind, but it hasn't died.
It's still running? Oh. Both 1 and 2, or did they just finally merge the two? Because that was the first one where they really tried to merge the two.
But they never updated the artwork in it.
Wow. Well, I mean, Ultima Online is still running, so that's even older. It is really truly insane. Yeah, but I mean, if people are enjoying it and it still generates cash, why not, right? I can't imagine that the server costs are all that high at this point. They've worked out all the bugs.
I don't know what the server. You get the users to pay for the server costs,
That's true. That's true too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking to see.
It's fascinating. What's going on right now is fascinating, and there's a real opportunity, I think, in the gaming market. And you got a lot of these independent publishers like ourselves who invest in and support 1 or 2 games a year.
Yeah.
Discord's one. But I don't know what their end result. I don't know what their end game is. I don't know whether they want to be this kind of independent publisher and make, they make a lot of money for themselves, and they make a lot of money for the people that write the games.
Yeah.
It works well for everybody.
So ultimately, as a publisher nowadays, you're going to be in charge of both the financing of the production of the game, or is it more the marketing and the release strategy for the game?
Depends where you find yourself. Each game is different. There isn't one model that fits all. And I think that when you look at product, the team is as important as the product. And you have to be able to work with the team. You have to be able, there has to be a synergy that exists. Because if that synergy isn't there, it's not going to work.
True.
You can get in, they're going to get mad at you. Something's going to happen. It's not going to be on time. Blah, blah. The product's never on time. I can tell you that. The only thing that's consistent is that Christmas is always on the same date.
True.
Yeah, but it's always interesting. It's always exciting.
That's true. So when can we expect the first big release from Accelerate?
I think in the fall of this year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any hints yet what it's going to be?
Yes, but we're not going to talk about it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Well, I think that's going to conclude the actual interview part of this.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.